fear can keep us trapped in unsustainable rhythms. If we are afraid that if we slow down, we are less
If I stop doing this, then what?
Yeah, if I stop doing this, I'm a failure. If I slow down, that will stop us from asking for help.
Yeah.
Because asking for help is weakness. It's not, it's strength. Hey everybody, welcome to the Leader Lab. This is Leadership Shorts, quick thoughts to help you level up your leadership. My name is Chad Wright. I'm the founder of Forward Partners, and I'm joined as always by my partner in podcasting, Emily Grace Deal. We need to put partner in podcasting on your business cards.
Yes.
Emily, what are we talking about today?
Last episode we talked about the role breaking points play in our lives.
Yes.
And how to recognize that there's one coming headed your way.
How can we spot it when we see it coming down the road?
Right.
Okay.
Once we see one approaching, how do we let off the gas? How do we avoid it?
Yes. And so I think that is really the goal, that we can let off the gas enough to be able to steer around it or to get off the burnout highway entirely, right? I think there's 4 questions that we need to ask ourselves. And in asking these questions, it will kind of show us the path forward, okay? So the first question that we really need to be honest about, and this one will be tough, what unsustainable rhythms am I practicing? We talked before about the path out of burnout is rhythmic, right?
Yeah.
It is having certain rhythms. Generally, if there's a breaking point coming, it's because we are burned out and are headed in that direction. We are practicing some unsustainable rhythms.
Yeah.
And we talked in a previous episode about how sustainability is, it has to be mixed with determination, right?
Right.
And so we really have to be honest about this. And sometimes this is hard to be honest about.
It definitely is, because then you have to actually see it, and then making that change. Once you've seen it, then you have to make the change, right? So then it's easier to just not identify it.
Yeah, so let's not look at the problem so we don't actually have
Don't look
to
at it in the
change
face.
anything. Because really the funny part is, if the answer to the problem was just work harder, we would be like, yeah, absolutely. If the answer is be more sustainable, back off,
Rest.
slow down, rest, boy, we don't like that idea. It goes against so much of what we're taught and how we're raised.
Yeah.
So that first question, what unsustainable rhythms am I practicing? The second question, what hard conversations am I avoiding?
That's a good one.
A breaking point almost always involves other people. Sometimes it's hard conversations with ourselves. Sometimes we need to be honest. Like when we recognize unsustainable rhythms, we have to, next is we got to have a hard talk with ourselves.
Yes.
But most often it's hard conversations with other people. When we see a breaking point coming, and that breaking point, we're thinking of it in terms of my leadership health. Like if I break, nothing else goes forward. It could be a breaking point in a relationship.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a hard conversation that we need to have to make sure we avoid that. It could be lots of different. It could be a breaking point in a career or in a job. It really is, though, recognizing what am I avoiding. And we avoid hard conversations all day.
Right. And sometimes I think we see them as really hard conversations, and they might not be. And that's just kind of that story we're telling about it.
That's
or
true.
It could, legitimately be a harder conversation. But if it's something that you've built up in your head, and it's probably not, that's something that I've run into recently. Is what
we tend to do that. We'll build it up in our head like this is going to be hard and challenging, so I'll do that later, right? Mm-hmm. The problem is, again, we talked about last time, these breaking points, sometimes they come out of nowhere. Sometimes we think we got a lot of road left, and it is on us because we're moving too fast, we're moving unsustainably, and we're not having those hard conversations. So we may think we have time to have it, and we really don't.
Right.
So that's part of this, I think, is if we see that breaking point, we need to move through these pretty rapidly, right? What hard conversations are you avoiding? The third one, who do I need to seek help from?
Yeah.
So once we recognize that there is a breaking point in our future, we need to realize that the path around that, the path out of burnout, it's not alone. Mm-hmm. Often being alone is what got us into that in the first place.
Right.
So who do we need help from?
Who are you going to reach out to? Yeah.
And when we raise our hand and ask for help, what do we usually find?
Mm-hmm.
We find help, right? We find people genuinely willing to help, because often we have people around us, they see this from the outside, right?
Yes.
It's amazing how often others will see the breaking point before
and how much they're not going to judge you to ask for help. And like that's what we keep thinking all the time is, right?
Yeah, they're going to think I'm less than.
Oh, right. If I can't just tough this one out, I am clearly not,
I'm a
leadership
failure.
material.
There's something wrong with me. Yes. But that ability to raise our hand and say, I need help. So who do I need to seek help from? Mm-hmm. And sometimes we don't know, by the way. That's part of why we ask this question, is we don't always know the person.
Right.
What we can start to recognize is, what experience have they had? What have they been through? and we can kind of write a short description of who the person is that can help us. Send that out to everyone we know. Who is this human? I need to know them. I have hit that point. I have done that before. And often I've done it after a breaking point, but I've started to employ this before a breaking point.
Right, because also sometimes I like that it's who do I need to seek out for help, and not just like just there's a lot of people you have for support that can help you in those scenarios, but they aren't all as the person to get you out of that.
Not out of that particular scenario, right? I think the best example we have this is we ran into some financial challenges in our business. And really the financial challenge it was just not knowing how to scale it beyond a certain point. So I looked at my circle, and nobody in my circle knew how to scale a business to the size we want to be at. So I went and found people that did.
Right.
And it started with, here's the description, send it out to the people who are in my circle, and they helped me find that person. And so we have to be able to do that, to say, who do I need to seek help from?
Who's the right person?
Yes. And the last one I think is one of the most important. What fears are holding me back? Because ultimately, if I can identify unsustainable rhythms I'm running, if I can identify hard conversations I'm avoiding, and I can identify who do I need to seek help from, if there is still a fear trapping me, I'm not going to go do any of those things.
And that's maybe closer to what I was thinking about some conversations aren't that hard.
Yes.
It's more actually just the fear that you have and you're telling yourself about that conversation.
Because fear can keep us trapped in all those. Like, fear can keep us trapped in unsustainable rhythms. If we are afraid that if we slow down, we are less
If I stop doing this, then what?
Yeah, if I stop doing this, I'm a failure. If I slow down, that will stop us from asking for help.
Yeah.
Because asking for help is weakness. It's not. It's strength. It will keep us trapped from having hard conversations. If I'm afraid of how they're going to react, I'm probably not going to go do that.
Well, and I think a good point here too is it doesn't have to be all four. You don't have to have an answer to all of these things for you to be at a breaking point, right? You can just be avoiding a really hard conversation, and that's just clogging up everything else. Or you could be doing something that's just really unsustainable, and it's making everything else harder.
I think you take any of those first three questions and you pair them with the fear question. Now you've got a next
You can
step,
identify it,
right?
yeah.
And like you said, you may not need all three of those first three questions, but take any of those, pair them with that. Now we have a next step. Once we have next steps, commitment is really the word to think about. Are we committed to taking those steps? Because eventually we're going to be forced to. That breaking point is going to happen. When we talk about rest, we talk about unintentional and intentional. Intentional rest is I'm going to be careful and rest and avoid breaking. Unintentional is I'm going to end up in the hospital.
You're broken now, so.
Yes, you are broken now. You are now forced to rest. You're going to rest either way. One path is a lot less painful. This is very similar. Are we committed to taking those steps? We've identified the fear that's stopping us from having these three conversations or thinking about these three things. Are we now committed to it?
Right.
Or are we going to let the breaking point force us to find a solution? I promise you, a solution that is not forced is always going to be easier. And this is, again, a road that I've been down multiple times. I know you've traveled down. We've all experienced this. This is common. I think these questions are kind of the way out, and then commitment to taking those steps. Leaders, if you see that breaking point coming, you've identified it, you see the signs of it, there is a way to let off the gas, and I'm encouraging you, please let off the gas. There is so much damage that comes from hitting that breaking point. And as long as you still have the ability to move forward, you can do anything. But that ability to move forward means we're not broken. It means we still possess the capacity to do that. And so I would encourage you to think through these questions. What unsustainable rhythms are you practicing? Because that's part of what got you on this highway through burnout and to the breaking point. What hard conversations are you avoiding? Often you are one solid conversation away from changing things, and it may be difficult, but we've got to confront that and figure out what that is. Who do you need to seek help from? Once you've identified that breaking point, who's the person who's going to help you be able to get off of that road? And combine any of those with what fear is holding you back. What fear is keeping you trapped in unsustainable rhythms? What fear is causing you to avoid conversation? Really, what fear is causing you to not hold your hand up and say, I need help? These questions and then the commitment to action and next steps is what holds us back. This is what we have to do to make sure that we are actually avoiding these breaking points and actually defeating burnout. This is a huge piece of that. All right, if people have questions, if they are on this road, they see the breaking point, they're asking these questions, and they might need some encouragement, they might need some help, how do they reach out to us?
They reach out to lab@forwardpartners.net.
Lab@forwardpartners.net. If they want to find socials where we are putting out all the information we learn and teach about leadership, where do they find that?
At Forward Partner.
At Forward Partner, all the major socials.
Yep.
Thank you so much for having this conversation. John, thank you for producing. Wilco Workspaces, thank you for your partnership. And thank you very much for joining us on this journey as we are all working to become healthier leaders that can create thriving teams. We will see you next time right here in the Leader Lab for Leadership Shorts.